Thank you. You know what I said in an email to everybody actually for specific areas that I need to.
Testing.
And I actually thought that Christian had like a database of.
Got it.
He said no, he doesn't.
What?
He's like
think
everybody's
everyone
like
feels that
doing
way,
their
but
own video.
Okay, I think we're going to get started. So welcome everybody, and welcome to the people who we are live streaming to. There are a lot of people sitting on their computers watching this. So on the screen are our goals for today. So we want to have an open dialogue. We're going to ask a lot of people to come down and answer some of the questions. We're talking about technology and innovation and how this will transfer the health system, and we want to hear the answers from the people who come down. So Kevin, this strategic priority, you want to talk a bit about that?
Thanks, Jill. Welcome everybody in person and electronically, and Happy New Year. This is our first meeting in the new year, so happy 2020. I hope you all had a very good holiday season. It is busy at UHN. So today I know we're operating over 120% at both acute sites. So hopefully this discussion about technology will help us deal with that in the fullness of time. So why technology? It is a means to an end, and it does align with a healthier world. Almost every one of our patients and many providers, particularly our youngest providers and those in training, entering the system, are telling us over and over again, why can I do my banking, get my vet care, look after my car, and do all sorts of things other than healthcare with apps more easily? And why do I have to drive to places like UHN, which are difficult to get to, expensive to park at? Wouldn't it be possible for us to think about better technologies that allowed me to access services closer to home? So one, for our patients, and two, for our providers. I think over and over again, getting providers better data, better information, and making it easier to do so as an important part of a digital ecosystem for all of us. But at the end of the day, it really does come back to our primary principle of putting the needs of the patient first. I think that's why we're ambitious and enthusiastic about a digital agenda.
So the other thing that we want to talk about is that technology is not going to make everybody's life easier.
Yes. So we all can think of examples where technology hasn't necessarily made life easier. Remember, we were all going to be paperless about 15 years ago, and I'm ashamed to tell you that I have some paper in front of me. So I think one of our big challenges is really thinking about, is this a solution actually improving care for patients and quality of work life for those who provide care for patients and those who support them? We have tons of examples where technology solutions have not worked out all that well, and that's okay. We're an academic health science center. We should try things, and proving that they don't work is just as important as proving that they do work. However, when it comes to a selection of technology that we're going to implement, like a new health information system, we obviously want something tried, tested, and true, and that actually does, again, align with our strategic plan and allow us to up our game. But it is tough to implement new technologies, and it's even tougher to implement them when you're operating at 126% or 25% occupancy. So I think we're all being very mindful of bandwidth at UHN, that as we embark on new technology interfaces and plans, we need to make sure that we're not overloading people. We also need to recognize that we may need to stop doing some things in order to do some technology upgrades as they're related to, again, improving quality of work life and improving patient care.
So, but technology does a lot of things for us. So Slido, for example, is an example of something that we're currently using to get anonymous questions and answer those questions. Thought Exchange is something that Human Resources purchased earlier this year, and that allows us to crowdsource information. And before we start the questions today, I'm going to introduce Kevin Myshak, who's going to share some things that the way we are going to use technology to improve well-being. Kevin.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Kevin and Jill, for the introduction. I've been told I have 60 seconds, so we'll get right into it. The technologies I'm about to mention are helping the wellness team, a small yet mighty bunch, further our reach in delivering wellness programming across UHN, or Team UHN. So first, and probably most accessible piece of technology that wellness promotes is the usage of the My EAP app from Morneau Shepell and the My Sun Life app from Sun Life. As most of you are aware, today at 1 p.m., we observed a moment of silence for the victims of the plane crash in Iran. This is a reminder to everyone that confidential counseling services are available through UHN's Employee and Family Assistance provider, Morneau Chappelle. The My EAP app allows you to arrange support directly from your smartphone. The My Sun Life app has done a great job in streamlining the benefits claims process. Reimbursements are often completed within 24 to 48 hours of submission. I use it all the time. Download it if you haven't yet. The next piece of technology I'll highlight are the virtual reality meditation goggles. With this, we offer to whisk away staff to a beach, a rainforest, or a Zen garden as a relaxing voice takes them through a 5 or 10-minute guided meditation. Currently, we only have 3 VR goggles, but we use them efficiently by incorporating them into team retreat days or meetings that Wellness has been asked to be a part of. We acquired the goggles as part of our Healthy Workplace Month programming in October. And then lastly, in our fitness centers, which are located at Toronto General, Princess Margaret, and Toronto Western, we have created an on-demand fitness experience. The on-demand fitness platform is available 24/7 and was specifically created to provide offerings to evening staff and those unavailable to access our regular classes. Here, using an iPad, members can select an instructor-led workout video, such as strength training, yoga, Pilates, and dance. The videos are then projected onto a large screen TV. For additional information regarding any of the items I've just mentioned, visit our webpage on the corporate intranet. You can also email us at wellness@uhn.ca and request to receive our weekly newsletter. Thank you so much for including me in today's open forum, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Now it's my pleasure, as we're talking about technology today, to welcome our new leader in the technology interface, our Vice President and Chief Information Officer, Dr. Sarah Muddett. So I'm going to let you welcome Sarah.
Sit, stand.
Whatever you like.
Okay, I'll just stand. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for the warm welcome that I've had over this past whirlwind 8 days. And I can honestly say that by Friday, I think I want to be first in line for the goggles. It has been a really tremendous opportunity to meet and greet so many of you, but there are so many more, and I'm looking forward to that opportunity. I'm incredibly proud and privileged to be in this role, and I thank Kevin for his creativity and the creativity from my CEO on the other side of the street, because this is kind of a new pioneering thing for us to begin to work a little bit more collaboratively, to share some resourcing, to share some talent, not necessarily mine, but between our two organizations, we have some tremendous IT capability that we really need to purpose, as Kevin says, to directly impact the well-being of our patients and providers. For those of you that haven't read Kevin's announcement, I'm sure you all have, but I am a doctor by background. I'm a newborn intensivist. I trained and practiced at Sick Kids too many decades ago to count, but it means I actually do understand the business. And I'm not a technologist, so Carl is going to be very, very critical in keeping me abreast of what's happening here technically and becoming really, really familiar. Because what I understand is what we can do with technology to actually deliver care, and that's what I really care about, not technology for technology's sake. So my role really is to stay very closely engaged with the business, with our clinical and operational leaders, our patient and family advocates, and so on, that will allow me to really have my finger on the pulse of where we can improve technology for the patient and provider experience, for the quality and safety of care, and for our education and research initiatives as well. Hugely excited about the opportunity of the health information system. You're all well aware that we completed our EPIC implementation at Sick Kids in June of 2018. I have lots of lessons learned, far from perfect, but it has actually transformed our organization significantly, and there's lots of things that I've learned that I would like to do slightly differently, and I'm working with the team very closely here at UHN so that we can all do this better even the next time around. So again, thank you so much. I'm incredibly excited about the opportunity. I have an open door, so please, by any time you're dropping by the executive offices, or if you see me in a hallway looking lost, which I can pretty much assure you for the next little while, please don't hesitate to stop me and introduce yourself and tell me a little bit more about what I need to know as I get oriented to this tremendous organization. So thank you very much.
I want to thank Sarah, and just not everyone will remember. It was a bit of a novel model, and I think we're really proud of it. I want to thank Dr. Ronnie Cohn, the CEO at Sick Kids, for this model, because we've talked about this for a long time. The graduates of Sick Kids, these remarkable children who have, some of whom have very, very, very significant and challenging diseases, are doing much better than they once did, and they're graduating to adult care. And one of the benefits of this model is that we will actually have an interactive system where those graduates can seamlessly move into their comprehensive tertiary and quaternary care at UHN, as well as begin building a system that I think may help Ontario struggle a little less with what integrated information technology systems look like. Just want to remind you that while an HIS, a health information system, is a lot of the discussion, the technology is just the tool. We're on a clinical transformation journey, and it'll be an abject failure if we look at this as a technology play. This is using technology to radically transform the patient experience and improve your quality of work life. So we'll keep that very much a focus, and Sarah's been terrific already at helping me be mindful of that. Before moving on, I also want to thank Duska and Carl and Michael and Joe, and who have I forgotten, missed? Any names? Pointing at somebody, just say the name. Oh, David, sorry, David. And have I forgotten anybody else, David? That's okay, that's good. Who, since David Jaffrey's departure, really have done a remarkable job at keeping digital really rowing in the same direction, doing fantastic work. So please join me in thanking those colleagues and welcoming Sarah.
So we are going to start with 5 examples. Kevin, you're going to go. It says here, as quickly as possible, to go through the examples.
Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 quick examples that I think are pretty remarkable. So the first example is right here at the Michener, the 12th floor simulation training center. This offers UHN and its learners and providers of tomorrow the newest technologies. It's particularly focused on robotics and virtual reality. A really great investment, and it's attracted very significant philanthropy. It's also incredibly important when we think about quality and safety that clinicians get exposure in real-time means to these kinds of simulations, as opposed to those having to occur in the actual operating room with real live patients. Also, UHN is partnering very, very closely with the Vector Institute, which, as you know, has been an internationally recognized leader in artificial intelligence. We've partnered with Vector and the University of Waterloo to enhance our Coral review. Those of you from imaging will recall that it's a peer review software used among imaging specialists and built right here at University Health Network. It's an AI software that helps radiologists analyze and interpret medical images. And the current state across the globe in first world countries is about a 3 to 5% error rate in radiologic reporting. That's anywhere you look. And that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but here at UHN, that means 20,000 cases. With this work, a 0% error rate has been achieved. That's a remarkable application of technology to patient quality and safety. Next is some really neat applications developed by Joe Cafazzo and Heather Ross and their teams, known as Medley. If you haven't had a chance to look at this, just Google it. You'll see that it's a remarkable platform being deployed originally, I think, in congestive heart failure, Joe, but has an opportunity to be deployed across many, many clinical domains. So how does it work from the patient side, starting with the patient as we always should? Patients actually input their weight, their blood pressure, their heart rate, and their symptoms. The data is analyzed by a Medley algorithm, and patients can then receive feedback about their medications and lab results. So rather than someone who's potentially going into congestive heart failure, or who might have some symptoms, rather than waiting for that to be further exacerbated, on a day-to-day basis, their medications and activities can be changed, so they prevent that exacerbation from ever occurring, and with fewer exacerbations means a better outcome and a longer high-quality life for patients. Secondly, how does it work from the clinician side? Well, clinicians remotely monitor and assess the patient's health status through the Medley dashboard. If you haven't seen this and you'd like to, I know Joe and his team would be happy to give folks a demonstration of that. Clinicians can then respond to alerts, and they serve as a first resource to patient concerns. Currently, the coordinator, who has a nursing background, manages 300 patients daily, optimizing our human resources and giving patients a forward to unknown confidence when they are worried about exacerbation. The next one is the dashboard that I have to tell you I use daily. And how do I know that we're at 126% at the Western and 121% at the General today? Because I have this dashboard live in my office. And it really helps us every day to look at patient flow, quality and safety, issues related to our pharmacy care. It's invaluable to our site leads. It also helps us think about future planning. And as we think about next year, should we do anything different based on what we've seen the first 2 weeks of this year around elective or scheduled casework? And it allows us to, again, identify trends and use data in a more meaningful way to improve the performance at UHN. There are some flaws, as always, with technology, and part of that is always about getting our data better, but I think UHN is increasingly evolving to an organization that says measure variation everywhere and understand whether variation has an impact on quality, safety, and the metrics that we know are important to our patients, our funders, and of course, our staff. Next, of course, we've talked about it, HIS, the Health Information System. We've talked a lot about that for a number of meetings, and I know it is a very important part of the clinical transformation journey. It is, again, the piece that supercharges the opportunity, but it is the tool. It is not the be-all and end-all alone. I know that we're going to talk about this in the questions, but I want to also thank our foundations. This is not an inexpensive endeavor to ensure that you have state-of-the-art quality and data and access to it. And our hope is to select one that is among the leading providers of health information service in the world so that we can remain in that list of the top 10 hospitals by giving clinicians the kind of data to make top 10 in the world decision-making and quality of work life possible. We have approached our foundations to help us in funding with this, and in the question period, I know Darlene's going to talk a little bit more about how will we, in tough economic times, make sure that we can afford this. Beyond HIS, UHN Digital will have some limited bandwidth for the next 2 years or so. I want to apologize in advance. There may be some things that we'd all like to get done through digital that, frankly, will have to take a back seat to a very successful install of a health information system leading clinical transformation. So apologies in advance. There may be things that you'd love to have happen, and we just won't have the bandwidth in addition to doing a really successful install on time and on budget. And so I'll apologize up front. Doesn't mean you shouldn't ask. It doesn't mean you shouldn't bring it forward, but it will really be a lens of, does this contribute to a successful deployment of our clinical transformation using HIS? So again, apologies up front if we frustrate you a little bit on making you wait on some other initiatives. I think, Jill, that's...
You've got the telesitter.
Oh, I've got the telecenter. I'm so sorry. Let me go to the telesitter one. This is actually a really neat one. Using technology to get better results more remotely. Those of us of a certain age will remember when you needed to monitor a patient and you basically hired a PSW and the PSW sat next to the patient. Well, this model, again, developed right here at UHN, a collaboration between the Sprott Department of Surgery and our Techna Institute, really allowed patient sitters who provided personal around-the-clock observation to patients to be virtually done rather than physically done. And so rather than having a one-person to one-patient ratio, UHN's telesitting platform uses technology to offer a 24/7 remote observation for patients for adverse, particularly post-surgical, but I suspect we'll explore increasingly medical events as well. And it allows, again, one sitter to remotely monitor approximately 6 patients. That would differ across clinical disciplines. It's resulted in a remarkable $800,000 cost savings, and it's expected to continue to save us money that we can redeploy to our acute mission in the years going forward. We also know, as you recall in our strategic plan, we want Canada and Toronto to be the center for commercialization of new ideas, and this is a real opportunity for commercialization of this platform, as well as Medley and the others we've talked about today. So we're really bringing to life the commercialization agenda, which will again spur a new economy in Ontario and bring some needed resources to UHN.
So very good. You did that very quickly. I was
Okay.
looking at the time.
Got it.
So we are going to move on to the question and answer portion now. And just a reminder on the screen, you go to slido.com, you enter the code hashtag UHN Tech, and you can either vote or add questions. We are going to try and go through the questions in the order that you voted on. And I would remind people, we are going to invite members of the audience to come down and answer some of these questions. If I forget to introduce you, please introduce yourself. And we do have 2 mic runners who will go up and down if we have questions in the audience. So the first question is, how will we pay for it? And 402 people want to know that, which probably is almost everybody in the audience and a lot of people who are tuned in. So how are we going to pay for it?
So let me start, and then Darlene will join us. So we have known for some time, and you have known before my arrival, that a refresh of information technology was necessary at UHN. So 3 ways we'll pay for it. One will be working with our foundations to hopefully attract donors who recognize that technology is an important part of healthcare. And some of our biggest donors already see this over and over. They talk about the data analytics and predictive analytics and things that are occurring in their sectors, and when will they come to healthcare. So I'm optimistic that we'll see some fundraising opportunities. The second is we're coming to the end of our bond servicing. You'll remember way back when, over 20 years ago, when the last big redevelopment occurred, we floated a bond, and that bond, I think, matures in 2022. So there'll be some resources available there that'll help us to pay for this. And then we're obviously going out and looking at acquiring some debt and working through our board finance committee. The debt, obviously, we hope a portion of this, there is an expectation based on other HIS installs around the world, that there is some payback, that there are some things we do currently with data and entry of data that's just inefficient. So we think we'll have some efficiencies to service that debt, and then we'll obviously hopefully find some savings associated with that. So let me invite Darlene up to see if she'd like to add anything to that, or correct me if she disagrees with any of that.
It's on.
No, I think you covered it pretty well, Kevin. We're taking a multi-pronged approach to see how we would actually finance that clinical component of the clinical transformation. So it is going to be a 3-pronged approach in terms of looking at the capital markets and debt in line with our current debt that actually expires, working with our foundation partners for fundraising opportunities, and as well looking at where there's opportunities once systems are decommissioned, where there's opportunities for savings within the system as well.
If any of you would like to make a large donation, the Dr. Michael Baker Health Information System is a possibility. If Dr. Baker was just waiting for the check.
Second question, and again, right up there, the timeline for implementing the new HIS, and on my cheat sheet here, it's Duska and Barry. So whoever gets here first.
Oh, you won.
I tried to go slowly.
Dr. Barry Rubin.
Vanna and Pat, as we know them as.
That's very funny. I didn't expect I'd come here and just start laughing. So there's been a very large amount of work getting ready to sign an agreement. And the things that are most important in this process is first determining what's the total cost of ownership of this over the next 10 years. So that's not just buying the software, it's also running the software. And in order to do that, you have to have an implementation team, so there's staffing considerations. And we also have to make sure that the infrastructure is acceptable from an IT perspective. So with all those considerations, we anticipate being finished the analysis of total cost of ownership at the end of this month, and if all goes according to plan, about the end of March, signing an agreement with the preferred vendor, and then there will be 2 years to get ready to do this before we go live.
No, that was accurate. Thank you.
It's accurate. It's accurate.
Just to make Duska, Barry, and the new CIO nervous, I like to say 18 to 24 months. And I should reinforce, Barry did say this, but I want to be super clear, just because of the process of procurement. We have not yet reached an agreement with a vendor. We remain in negotiations, and until we get the terms and conditions that are good for UHN, we won't be signing any deal.
Okay, the next question. When when Nintendo profits were down, CEO Satoru Iwata and senior executives volunteered to draw a reduced salary for 5 months to atone for the downturn. Do you think this is a better model than laying off staff to balance the budget?
Well, I learned a long time ago not to try to defend my income. So let me park myself, and I'm going to make a promise to you. I'm going to refer this question to the chairman of the board, Brian Porter. I think he frankly needs to see this as an option. But let me talk to you about why I think that we're in a slightly different situation. So 3 things, not for myself, but for the non-union employees across the organization. One I learned from Andrea Horvath when I was in Hamilton was the MPP for the region that the hospital existed in, and that was just as we should always honor the collective agreements we negotiate with our union colleagues, we should also honor the terms and conditions of employment of non-unionized employees equally, and it was actually Andrea who taught me that when it was a good learning. The second piece, I think, is in the Nintendo case, there was a downturn resulting in a strategic direction chosen by the company. And already, you should all know this, for myself, 30% of my income was actually taken away, so it's separated off, and I have to earn it back by performance. So if I didn't earn it back, if there were things that were attributed to my performance, I wouldn't get that money. And every year, the board has the determination of what percentage of my income that I have to re-earn. For the VPs, Emma, I think it's 20%, am I correct, or 15%? I think it's 15 to 20, depending upon the person. And then it goes down. The lowest group, I think, is about a 5%. And in healthcare, unlike the private sector, we took this money away from non-unionized people, and then they had to earn it back based on performance. So in a way, we already have some of these models. I guess at the other end of it, we had a big number to find. And if we did a similar amount to Nintendo, it would probably result in about a 2 FTE savings. And unfortunately, we have a $30 million problem. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't consider it. And I guarantee you that I will forward it to the board chair and the Human Resource Committee for them to consider whether they think that's a better option than some of the solutions that we've come up with.
Okay. Currently, Team UHN is using a combination of Excel, paper, web forms, bulletin board for staff scheduling. Shift switch and vacation request. Is there any plan for UHN to go digital on staff scheduling to improve workflow efficiency, manage availability, and real-time request status and notifications? And I'm going to ask Carl to come down. Come on down, Carl. I think that's all.
Thanks very much. Actually, that's multiple questions in one there, I think, and multiple answers there. I see a big sign there that says "Introduce yourself." My name is Carl Bertanen, and I'm the acting executive director of digital operations and also the head of research IT for UHN Digital. So going back to this question, a complicated answer to this. The one thing that I can say is that we are definitely aware of all of these. We've been looking into different products. Anything that we put into our system has to function within the existing ecosystem that we have of products, which will include HIS coming forward, which also includes tools like Microsoft Office 365. So as we start to mature along the roadmap of developing each of those, this is definitely an area that we're going to be focusing on.
Carl, do you have any guesstimates of timing? Recognizing there are some different ones. The ones that I hear people talking about most often are staff scheduling and switching.
Yeah, so I think part of that is, I think we would try to, so the one thing we want to make sure that we don't do is try to land this too close to HIS deployment. So I would say we either have to be 6 months before or 6 months after the deployment of HIS to introduce a new tool like that into our environment.
So let us, with Carl and Sarah, come back to you later and talk to you about whether 6 months before or 6 months after
sure.
is more likely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I think this one's for you, Kevin. How many jobs and in what departments does UHN expect to shed in order to remedy UHN's difficult financial position?
So right at the moment, the operations groups are meeting to look at what opportunities exist. They're all challenging. They're not easy. We don't know the answer to that question at the moment. I'll see if Emma or Diana want to add anything to this one from an HR perspective. It all depends on what we receive in the next fiscal year, which begins April the 1st. So if the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, Government of Ontario, gave us a 2% increase, which many people think that would be, that's out of the realm of the possible in the current fiscal environment, it would probably be very few. If it was a 0%, every 0% year UHN starts with is about a $30 million savings that we have to find. And we always first start with attrition and retirement. So again, we'd always do that and look at, of the retirees and those positions that are vacant, what can we save? UHN has been very fortunate and done a very, very, very good job in the past of actually being able to manage with few people in departing the organization who didn't wish to. Unfortunately, the last couple of years, I think that the size with 0% or virtually 0% increases has resulted in us in seeing some people actually having to exit the organization. As soon as we know from the ministry and Ontario Health what percentage we have and what that number looks like, we'll get back to you, and then we'll have a discussion about whether it's across the board or whether it needs to be performance-based and how we'd adjust that. I want to be really frank and honest with you. I think we're coming very close to the line. There is not a flashing light on efficiency in any area at UHN. So it's not like we're overspending relative to some. We look very much in line with peer groups, and I would suggest that actually being a top 10 hospital in the world, we're getting really good value for that money for the people of Ontario. That having been said, when 0% arrives, you still have to find a way to cut your coat to fit your cloth. I think we will at UHN, if 0% continue, have to start to talk about limiting access or be doing something we've historically not done, other hospitals have, really being open about closing programs and saying, with the current resources, we don't have the capacity to accept more patients. Of course, when they walk into the emergency room, we will always treat a patient, but when it comes to elective work, I think we're going to have to become more and more selective. And frankly, we have, to my knowledge, never said we won't accept an additional patient, even when we go well beyond the funded levels that QBP process gives us. So I think we're getting pretty close to that. And I don't think that there's big juice in this lemon on efficiency. People are working really hard. I also want to apologize because asking people, and we're very committed to quality and safety, but expecting us to be the safest, most high quality hospital and expecting people to operate at over 120% occupancy, those two things don't go together. When you look at high performance, high reliability organizations, be they in aviation or manufacturing or anything else, they never would consider going over 100% productivity, and unfortunately we are. So it does have the threat of significant impact on quality and safety, trying to really bring that to the attention of our funders. And I think we'd be better off to do less work with the resources we have and ensure that it's of the highest, safest quality than continue to accept patients when we don't have the resources to adequately care for them.
So I'm going to give Duska and Barry a little rest because I'm fascinated. The next question has 232 votes for and 73 against, and I've not seen that before. UHN has decided to remove phone and TV rental services from patients, expecting them to have a phone or tablet and use guest Wi-Fi. What is UHN going to do to provide equitable access to these services if patients don't or can't, e.g. impaired vision or hand function, use the technology? And I am going to ask David Wilger, because I know he knows the most about this.
If anybody else wanted to raise me down. Thank you very much, and thank you. So I have to. I don't see the sign, but I'll introduce myself. So I'm David Wilger. I'm the Executive Director of Education and Technology Innovation, and I'll say a few things. First of all, thank you for this question, and thank you for all your feedback through this process, because it does show that as an organization, we're walking the walk of putting the patients first, and that's been very clear. Just to address the format of the question, I'll say this. So just for all of you, what we had at the organization was a third party who's been here for many, 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 many years, who were providing a service to the patients directly. They covered all of their equipment. There was a revenue sharing model. Over the years, that model has really gone away as people have been bringing their own devices. The company let us know a couple of years ago that they would be withdrawing their services. We worked with them to extend that a little bit, and we've been working hard more than 2 years to think about what to do next. We looked at many, many options. We went out to market. We had conversations across the organization. And actually, the most equitable and fair and patient-centered solution that really surfaced was to bring your own device. So we rolled that out, Toronto General, Toronto Western, and Princess Margaret at the beginning of this year. We have had some feedback. For the most part, it's been very positive. A couple of little bumps along the way. We are having this conversation at Toronto Rehab as well, where we have some long-term patients and with some particular needs. So we're really working with our staff, trying to figure out how best to provide the most equitable service. But when we looked at all of the options, this was certainly, I think, the right way to move forward.
Thanks, David. I have to say, because I had many conversations with David, and the other fact that I think you let me know was how many people are currently bringing their own, or were currently bringing their own devices, and the fact that the purchase of the services was going down every year, and you can't buy a service that doesn't exist.
So can I just add two things, Jill? One, I think thanks to David and the team for doing this work. It was a very significant investment to make an alternate choice. And with the other pressures on our plate and the importance of some of the other technology and operating pressures and that utilization that was already occurring, I do want to reinforce we will be very committed, if there are those unique patients who are very special cases, to looking at how can we address those. They may be unique and special in some of our Toronto rehab sites. They may be some unique and special in some of our neuro programs, et cetera, et cetera. So what we don't want to do is say, when we have a solution for 90 or 95%, not implement that, but rather focus on the 5% who may not work well and find unique solutions for those while still moving forward with the rest of the organization.
Okay, the next question, and it is Barry and Duska again. When the new HIS is implemented, what technology will be the first to be integrated, and how are these decisions made? I'm going to let Duska go first. Yeah.
Come on down, though, because I think it's best to tag team the second part of this. So good afternoon. I'm Duska Kennedy from UHN Digital. I didn't get the sign, but there we go. I think it's a great question. As you have probably heard, I'll start from a macro perspective. We are purchasing an enterprise-level hospital information system, health information system. It is going to be deployed across inpatient, outpatient, all specialty areas. So we want to be very clear about that. As a general principle, we have assumed that the entire organization and all clinical areas are within scope. And one of our fundamental principles from the beginning was that we want to achieve a high degree of clinical system consolidation. We have hundreds of clinical systems in our environment currently, and through this project, what we want to achieve is a more patient-centered record. And we can't achieve that with hundreds of systems that are being duct-taped and interfaced together. So that is our overall principle, and what we're doing is if there's organizations or pockets of the organization that feel that they should be opting out, if I can use that language, out of the HIS, we're really asking them to put together a compelling case and have it be evidence-backed. So initial position is that there's going to be a high degree of consolidation and integration. If we get to the point of device integration, that's an area where we need to do some decision making. That will be, I would say, certainly informed by our clinical stakeholders. It is very costly, but there's a certain level that all of our clinicians are expecting, and having a higher degree of integration with our devices certainly will lead to greater efficiencies. So I'm going to pass things to Barry, who will speak through some of the decision making around that and how we'll make decisions.
Sure. So one of the examples of a technology that we've discussed using that we could potentially layer on top of the new HIS would be voice recognition or natural language processing. So you can imagine, I think you've probably all heard stories of the clinician is seeing a patient and they're not looking at the patient, they're looking at the screen. And there's data to suggest that every hour of clinical care is associated with 2 hours of computer time, which is not somewhere we want to go. So imagine if you had a natural language processing system where you speak, the computer listens, types the note, but more than that, recognizes the phrases that you're saying, automates population of the order sets that are going to be appropriate for that patient, and could even automate the billing process. So that's just one example of a technology that we're going to be looking at, and the decision will be what's the cost and what's the potential benefit.
Do you want to speak around, I know there's been other questions, if time permits, who's making these decisions and how? And I know yourself and Terry are leading or overseeing some of that.
Sure. So there's a clinical working group that has representation really from all areas of the hospital and all professions. And everything that is considered from overall HIS system to subsections of that system to how we're going to implement things goes through this clinical working group. And we make recommendations up to the next level, which is the executive committee. So it's not one person in isolation. There's a very robust governance structure to make these type of decisions.
Thank you.
Thanks. So the next question, I think there's probably, I guess, a misunderstanding in the first part. With the current budget deficit, there has been a delay in the decision regarding the new HIS. And then the second part is, are we considering IT partnership with another hospital organization to leverage purchasing power? I'm going to let you answer this.
So the timing of getting to the selection of an HIS has not been budget dependent. The question might refer to the fact that I think 5 years ago or 6 years ago, you did look at an HIS system and it was a very expensive endeavor. And I think we've come back and the world's evolved in 5 or 6 years as well, and there have been other installs. So I think, so in this iteration, we're on time with the plan that we had. We're being very prudent about not rushing a contract that we're going to have to live with for many years to come, getting the right product and getting the right contract and predicting the right costs. So I think we're doing this cautiously, but and I don't want to say slowly, but at an appropriate pace. And if it means it takes us a little bit longer to get the right contract negotiated, that's better than signing a contract to hurry us along in order to, frankly, implement something that'll be more costly and may not meet our needs. So I think that's actually the right approach. Yes, Sarah's a perfect example of are we trying to share things with other hospitals? I think by having a shared CIO with sick kids, it's an example of where we believe that the technology interface should be able to span the system. And I think as we get further along, we'll keep open the opportunities for us to consider whether or not it's a good idea or a bad idea to open that more broadly. So there are many, many hospitals who frankly have reached out to me, said, gee, depending upon what vendor you go with, I know you wrote your RFP in a model that allowed others to join, we might be interested. I think one of the things we want to be a little bit careful of, and I heard this from a whole lot of people when we were doing rounds around HIS, is in our history there were times when with SIMS, some of you felt our attention was more on our external users than our internal users, and we just want to make sure that before we expand this to other partners, should that be the outcome, we really have a great functioning system for those people who provide care, undertake research, and provide education at UHN, and then would be more than happy to open that up if others were interested in collaborating. Sarah, is that fair?
I think the next one's yours too, and there are echoes, I think, in this one of the Nintendo question. Good people have been let go to cut costs. This causes mental health issues, fear, and pressure on everyone involved. Why high-paid VPs don't temporarily give a bit of their high salaries to cut costs instead of firing people? A world-class organization should be setting an exemplary leading model.
So thanks for the question. It is a very challenging discussion because VPs, or I'll just say non-unionized staff, they also have negotiated within an environment where it is competitive. You'll know some governments have toyed with rollbacks where everyone does it, but to be honest with you, I think UHN has to have the best talent that Canada or the world has to offer, and so we do need to remain competitive in our compensation. That having been said, I just want to remind you, we've looked at this many times and it remains true. UHN does not spend more on administrative management than other peer hospitals. As a matter of fact, we spend slightly below the average, I think, Emma, on this one. But I know that won't make it easier when we say goodbye to people. I think the other piece, and I know this is a difficult discussion and there will be disagreement in this, management is valuable as you're trying to transform a system. And I think there's been lately this view that, well, management is expendable. As we embark on a radical new master plan, which I hope will give us the kind of state-of-the-art facility we want to work in, a cyber infrastructure plan that makes us competitive and world-class and remain in that top 10, and a whole bunch of other clinical transformation initiatives, the importance of management is not insignificant. That having been said, we will always be looking at our comp. I do want to remind you, we have considerably downsized a number of executive positions over the last 2 years. We've combined roles, we've reduced roles, we've left vacancies, and I would say as we look further ahead, there's more of that likely to come at UHN across the management portfolios because we are always trying to put more money at the front line. So we have significantly reduced that, and I'm happy online to give you kind of a rundown of the positions that have been combined or eliminated and where those savings have been held. And last but not least, there is under labor law some responsibility when you recruit someone and you offer them a salary. If you're going to change their terms and conditions of employment, you run the risk of them claiming a constructive dismissal. And this is not a time when I hope we see a massive exodus of great leaders from UHN. So I think we just want to keep that one in mind. But we will certainly put more details on how we've found savings so far.
Okay, the next question. Before any decisions and purchases are made regarding the new HIS, can the people who actually use it, I should go say actually use it, vote on the ones they want? I feel the power to make these decisions rests with the higher-ups who have no knowledge of what it's like to work on the front lines. So I think...
Well, let's bring the gang back up. Gary, Duska, maybe Sarah wants to join for this one, but I think one of the things we've done very, very well in this process is ensure that the driving committee is a clinical coordination committee, and Barry and Terry chair that. And so you do already have voice. If whoever asks this question and others who feel like you haven't or would like to have more input, please reach out through your manager, director, VP, and get connected to Barry and Terry, who can tell you how you can actually have more input. I have to say, it won't be a vote because, unfortunately, the procurement rules of Ontario require us to pick a vendor and negotiate with that vendor. And if we're unsuccessful with that vendor, then go to the next vendor. But what you should be able to do in this model is look at what are the areas that are concerning you, and will the vendor of choice be able to respond to your concerns as best as clinically possible. Want to add anything?
Sure, thank you. So there actually has been quite a bit of engagement across UHN of staff in making this decision. So first, when we were starting the RFP process, we invited dozens and dozens of people, if not hundreds, to try the different systems and tell us what they thought. After we had identified a preferred vendor, we held approximately 30 sessions where we invited people from different groups, transplant, nephrology, cardiology, on down the line, to meet with the primary vendor and go through the module that would be used in their area. So these sessions would typically have 10 to 25 people. So there's been hundreds of people that have given us their impression of how the system works. Now, it's not 17,000 people, but there are a lot of people from across the organization. This was not a decision that was made by senior management and then enforced. There was a tremendous amount of input that went into this.
Thanks, Barry. I'm going to warn Sarah. I'm going to ask her to answer the next one. Our colleagues from Sick Kids tell us about very basic and a non-flexible HIS system. There are multiple add-on functions that are required in order to deliver safe patient care. What are the UHN strategic priorities to prevent it from happening with our HIS, and what current system assessments take place?
Great question. Firstly, I think we all understand that a lot of the health information systems are far from perfect. Many of them are a bit on the dated side. They're not as user-friendly, perhaps, as we wanted. And as Barry just said, making good decisions around the best solution for an organization is the starting point. And then there's the months of configuring and designing. And I think, as Duska said, we want to work with the foundational systems as much as we can. We're not recoding. But we have an infinite capacity to configure the system to meet the needs of our end users. And in fact, we experienced it at Sick Kids that in fact, every time we thought there would be no flexibility, there was almost too much flexibility. And people spent hours and hours, ruminating over some decisions that really didn't need to have that kind of attention. And so there's actually more flexibility. So we'll have to set some parameters around that. And I think that the reality is that as we roll this out and begin to do this building and designing, we make dozens and dozens of decisions a day. And there will have to be parameters around those decisions. We want to standardize where we can. If everything is unique in every part of the organization and down to infinite granularity, it's very hard to keep those systems fresh and to upgrade and to manage and to troubleshoot and even to support end users. So there will be a real mission around where can we standardize, where it makes sense, what's the best configuration that meets most of the needs, and building consensus. It's never going to be perfect, but it really is, these systems are really quite flexible. In terms of, and the lens for patient safety and patient care, that's what it is about. It is about how the end user is going to use the system in an individual encounter with a patient doing their particular tasks. It is really down to that level. So it's through a patient care, a patient safety lens, and those decisions the technologists do not make. These are the decisions that you'll be making as an organization that the technology analysts will then build into the system for you. But they will be your decisions, and we will absolutely have those sorts of criteria so that you feel comfortable making those decisions, and that takes a little bit of while because it is a bit of a learning to be able to make those decisions and to trust your colleagues to make decisions, because we can't actually engage every single provider on every single decision. So lots of things that we know how to do. We have to start exercising our muscles a little bit to make some of these decisions, but I think that the question is valid, but the system is actually the system, at least your preferred vendor at this moment, and I think all of them, have some very strong built-in flexibility, and they're continuing to adapt as our needs in healthcare evolve as well.
I think the next question, maybe Sarah and Carl, when is UHN going to start streamlining and modernizing our communications tools? More and more teams are just going outside the organization to use chat features, message groups, and other tools that are available everywhere else, and way more user-friendly than anything Microsoft pulls out. My guess is this is about the tools that clinicians are going to use to interface with whatever system we buy.
Or with each other, probably even more so, I'm thinking. So I'll start, because Carl knows the landscape. I expect you're in a similar position that we are at Sick Kids at the moment. For years we had the traditional overhead paging and pagers, and then people started to get frustrated, and then we got some new tools, and then we got a few new tools, and then other people found really neat things they wanted to use. So you end up with this cacophony of opportunity, and people are all using different tools. And we're just about to introduce the HIS, which also has built-in communication tools. So you've got secure chat, you've got your inbox functionality. At Sick Kids, we use all the mobility functions of Epic, Haiku, and Canto. So everybody's using their mobile devices to interact with the HIS. We use the iPhone for barcode medication. We have a different alarm management system. So it's really, this is a very common problem in our complex environments, to have multiple tools that have gradually been patched together to meet needs. I think working together to find the best possible unified communication strategy, leveraging what we know, trying not to make it too confusing, but also trying to meet the needs. And as a CIO, the first thing I can say is if people go out and find something else to do, it means that we've probably not actually listened right, or we haven't been able to really solve that problem, so we need to do that together. And maybe Carl can talk about some of the more immediate plans on what we're going to do.
Sure. So, and definitely I'd like just to reiterate the point that, we are a limited team and we don't have unlimited resources. And so trying to bring in complex new tools around communication requires a certain level of support. So what we want to do is we want to try to streamline that and have it integrated into current products that we're already supporting in our environment, like the ones that are going to be coming out with the new HIS. And also, we have started down this journey as well already with the rollout of Microsoft Office 365. We actually do have full licenses for Teams integration. Right now we're actually in the planning stages of how we're going to roll that out and set the governance around using Teams as a communication tool and some of the chat functionality as well. So that is something that is on our current roadmap for this next year coming up. And there's also, and part of that delay as well is there's a lot of governance and also security, privacy-related concerns that have to be checked before we actually roll these things out. So even though we have the license, we still have to do a lot of checks and balances.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll take this back.
Stay tuned.
You thought you would just come to your first open forum and sit quietly. That was wrong. Given the new CIO position is shared between UHN and Sick Kids, what is the plan for the structure and leadership of the former T&I portfolio moving forward?
So I think T&I is technology and innovation, if I'm correct. All of the what I'll call traditionally digital features have been moved under Sarah's leadership. And we're actually having a bit of a dialogue about innovation. So I think everyone at UHN does innovation. And I don't think ever really said we have a centralized process for innovation. But increasingly, I think we want to think about a table of people who are most interested in scientific and medical innovation and how we get people to those tables. What are appropriate things for us to focus on centrally, and what are appropriate things for program services to focus on as we move more to a program-based model that follows our patient across the continuum. I think that whole discussion of innovation needs a form, and it won't necessarily sit in any single portfolio, but may span many. I would say each program is looking at doing very innovative things. Then we need to think about what I'd say particularly at the forefront will be digital innovation. And I think the interface between a focus on digital strategy and a tie back to Sarah and her role will be very important. And then tying that back to the vice presidents and EVPs, as well as the program medical directors and division heads, is a place where I think we're going to have to make some decisions about which foci and innovation we can afford and focus on. All of you, or many of you, wear dual hats as appointees of the University of Toronto who work at University Health Network, your academic appointments. So everyone is going to continue to do their academic innovation through their academic responsibilities. I think where we have to be a bit more explicit is what will be our corporate innovations related back to the strategic plan. And as we get the next iteration of our structure defined, that'll become more apparent. I've heard from lots of you, and if any of you have further ideas, I invite you to shoot me an email or give me a ring if you have thoughts about this one.
So I'm conscious of the time, and I do think that the next two questions have really been part of the answers that we've talked about already. If we get a new IHIS, how will the unique needs of different practice areas be taken into consideration? And then the other question is about how do people who have ideas contribute? I guess what I would say is, Barry or Duska, is there anything you haven't said that you'd like to say?
Happy to speak to this one. We anticipate that about 2/3 of the decision-making on implementation is going to happen at the level of what's called the HIS interdisciplinary team. So that's nurses, allied health, clerical staff, physicians, working together in about 15 to 20 teams to, as Sarah said, look at the different modules and decide how you want to configure that module. So this does not come out of the box and there's the system, there's only one way to use it. There's an infinite number of ways to use it. So we anticipate that in different areas, staff will have the opportunity to say, this is what our workflow is, and this is how the module that's relevant for transplant, relevant for nephrology. This is how we're going to configure it to work best to meet our needs. And that's very different than saying we're going to customize it. You don't want to change the software that comes out of the box, because then when there's a next iteration, which happens quarterly, it becomes impossible to keep up. So there is a tremendous opportunity for UHN staff to mold this to work at UHN.
So the last question, I think, is the one about using paper. It sort of takes us back full circle to where you started, which is they promised we wouldn't be using paper anymore. So do you want to talk about that? Because I know there is a big savings there, and I think there are people within the organization who have some ideas about it.
Yeah. So regardless of the HIS, I think there's a whole number of great ideas. Ed Rubenstein and his team have been thinking about this one. I know a number of people in our purchasing department do we have too many printers? Are we printing too much stuff? Could we be using more electronic media anyway? The answer is yes, but it is still, unfortunately, far too paper-based. So the intent absolutely is to do so. You and I will both notice that the younger you are, the less paper you seem to carry with you because you actually have everything on here and can flip between it. So there is an intergenerational learning opportunity. But our objective is certainly to be less paper dependent. I don't know any place yet that has completely eliminated all paper, but it would be lovely to be the first place that did.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us and thank people for watching live stream. It's been a full hour, and thank you very much.